Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. Blender Ed, Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, December 2nd. And you know what we do on Fridays? We fight on Fridays. Maybe I don't fight with the people in the YouTube chat, but feel free to post your comments and your questions in there. But we're covering the MMA slate, the UFC Orlando card for tomorrow night. 7 p.m. Eastern, so it's a late card, especially for 15 fights. They're going to be rolling these fights out on a conveyor belt. I mean, we have some weigh-ins going on right now. I believe everyone so far I see is making weight. We should have 15 fights. You never know. We were off last week with the MMA, but the week before that, we got the first late swap slate, and of course the main event gets canceled mid-card. So they ain't getting rid of this. So we'll be talking about late swap stuff, right? Because getting your advantage through it, I think, especially in the beginning where people don't know how to utilize it well, is going to be a bit of an edge. And I used that edge 2 weeks ago, won the 555 for 30,000. So let's see if we could do it again. So give me those thumbs ups in the chat. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Wataz Suki Singh here early as usual. Kickstart, good morning. Bart B, Adam Eisen, Card Fan, Defik. Good morning. I love 15 fight cards. 15 fight cards, less duplication and more options. And the larger the slate is, the larger the card is, the more important ceiling is. When we have these 11 fight cards, then it's like, oh, can I get an 85-point win out of someone? That could be optimal. That could be in the winning lineup. With 15 fights, you should be aiming for 100, okay? You should be aiming for, 100 plus out of favorites and 90 plus out of underdogs, but you'd still rather 100 even out of the underdogs. And I think we have some underdogs that could score 100 points on this slate. So, no matter how the ownership is, always look at the fights and go on this large card and go, how do I get 100 points out of this fight? And there's some fights that you could practically X out because the likelihood of them getting 100 is very low. Depending on their ownership. If you tell me they're 4% owned, maybe you take a shot. But I don't think any fighter on this slate is going to fit the bill of they're going to be low enough owned for their 100 plus point scoring upside. And we covered a lot of that on the Ground and Pound podcast. That should be coming out today. We recorded it last night. Liam, Mike, myself, almost 2 hours worth of content breaking down each and every fight. Liam, he's the MMA expert, goes through how the fight is probably going to play out. And I kind of overlay the DFS strategy on top of that. So if you're a RotoGrinders premium member, combo premium, get NBA, get NFL, get PGA, get MMA, get college, get college basketball, college football, get soccer. We got World Cup soccer going on right now. So go get that. Click the link in the description, get $10 off your first month. So I added, I added 2 new columns. I added 1 new column this week, but a new column 2 weeks ago to my MMA spreadsheet. And I'll show you that here. Maybe let me make it so everything could fit on the screen. Just so I could see everything. We get all the fighters. Can we get all the fighters on the screen? Let me make it even smaller. Okay. Okay, there we go. I think everything's on the screen. So last time we were here, I added this OPT column, and I call it the optionality column. And that's basically I gave it like six points per fight. Okay, so the first fight is 6, second fight is 12, then 18. Then this is arbitrary. Okay, there's no scientific means for that. I typically just go 100 divided by how many fights are on the card, and then I added them up from there. So basically, when it comes to late swap, it's more advantageous to have more information to build your lineups. So the early fights are less important than the later fights. Okay, so I want to add an optionality value to it. Is it going to make the grandest of differences? No. Like the difference between, if I see here, with Jaregui, right, 6. If she was the last fight and 90, her score would go up by 0.04. Okay, so the difference between between the first fight and the last fight is only the difference of like 0.04 in my little model. So it's not like dramatic at all, but it solves some 50-50 type of issues. If I took away this column and two fighters were very similar, I'd rather take the later fighter. Okay? So I have this column in here, and I weight that. You could weight that whatever way you want. If you want to weight later fighters higher, then weight it higher, right? What exact weight do I put on it? It's not scientific. I could be wrong. Okay, so you don't have to even bother asking. I'm just trying to put something there to say, hey, 3-4 fights in, I know information, and now I can build my lineups accordingly based on what the fighters previously scored. I want more optionality for that. And then I also added this VAR column. I call a variance column. Just it's more of a reference point for me for when the card is going on, of which fights are lower variance, which fights are higher variance. So, like, what's the difference between low variance and high variance? High variance fight means one person could score a lot and the other person could score very little. So fights that are more likely to end inside the distance are going to be higher variance fights. Fights that are more KO dependent for scoring are going to be high variance fights. Fights that are more likely to go to decision and more likely to not have a knockout are going to be lower variance fights. Okay? And I put this in as a reference point, and it's an arbitrary reference point, low, mid, high. So throughout the card, I know, do I have to add variance to my lineups? Do I have to decrease variance in my lineups? So I know which fights are which and when they happen. Because every 20 minutes, a new fight is going to lock, right? So you're probably going to be about 20, 25 minutes behind. This card, they're going to roll it out on a conveyor belt. So I don't think we can get a situation where the fight, like 3 fights from now, is locked while the current one is going on. I think they're really going to, at 1 o'clock that this Jaregui Nunes fight is going to lock. Then by the end of it, the next fight is already going to lock. So like you're going to have like a one fight like gap, but I don't think that gap is going to extend that much to the main card because they have to fit like 8 fights in 3 hours. So I don't think it's going to be. You have to react like way in advance. So why I do this, okay? Understand, and I explained this on the MMA Ground and Pound podcast. And I'm going to keep on explaining this until people get it. The natural instinct is to do the opposite of what you should be doing. Okay? Most people, they go, oh, well, I want to take early fighters because if they put up a big score, like then I could just play the chalk at the rest of the slate. It's like, yeah, you're thinking of the positive benefit of, let's say you play the first fight, Jaregui and Nunes, and Jaregui puts up 130. I don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, she could put up over 100. Especially if she actually commits to some takedowns, because Nunes is just horrible on the ground. So let's say she puts up 130 points, most likely going to be optimal at 9,300. It's like, okay, now I could take a main event fighter. I could take Jonathan Pierce. I could go and take Nico Price. Take whatever the chalk is. It's like, okay, that's the positive benefit. But what happens if Jaregui puts up 78 points at 9,300? Well, now you don't want to play the chalk anymore, right? Now she's not going to be optimal. I mean, on a 15-fight card, 78 points for 9,300 ain't going to be optimal. So now that lineup is dead. Dead for first place. It's dead for first place. Okay? But you prioritize early fighters. But when do we know this information? After the first fight. Okay? So let's say after the first fight, you have her in a lineup and get 130. Okay, I'm using the first fight as an example. This extends as the card goes on. Now, obviously, she's most likely going to be optimal. So now you want to build variance into your lineups, right? You're competing for first place now, right? All that equity. Remember, equity, the payout structure is the hockey stick, right? It goes low, 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 and then straight up, okay? If you have an optimal fighter in your lineup, you're competing against that the blade of the hockey stick, the top 5%, top 1% equity. If you don't have an optimal fighter, you're not competing for the blade at all. At all. You may think in your head that you could get up there, but you're not. You're competing for a min cash. That's it. Whether or not it's a 1.5x or a 3x even, if you get a little bit up the hockey stick, up the handle of the hockey stick. But it's going to be from 22%, 25% up to like 5%, there's not that much of a difference. So you're really just competing for a min cash. So if Jauregui puts up 78 points, for instance, and wins, she's not going to be optimal. And this is where you have to say in your head, okay, even put it on a Post-it note. The Post-it note should read, what game am I playing? Because you're going to be playing two different games depending on your lineup when you consider a late swap. So this is the main reason why I'm only playing 8 lineups this slate. I played 6 lineups 2 weeks ago. I'm not playing large field contests. I'm throwing them in the large field contest, but I'm mostly playing the smaller field stuff because there's bigger edge in late swap for those contests, especially since I'm not competing for the optimal. I don't need the optimal to win, right? Ricky Tercios was in the optimal 2 weeks ago, and I won the 5-5-5 without him. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's say you have Jauregui. She puts up 78 points. You are now not competing for first place. You're not. I'm telling you, you're not. 78 points at 9,300, you're not competing for first place. Okay? So what game are you playing? You're playing min cash game. That's what you get. You're not playing first. Most people's instinct is, oh my God, I have like a 14% owned 78 in my lineup at 9,300. I need to get off Jonathan Pierce. I need to get off, I don't know, who's that? Marcelo Rojo or Phil Rowe or something, some of the chalkier guys, because I need to make up ground. Well, you're not competing for the top 1% anymore. You're competing for just the top 25%. And in MMA, it's mostly binary outcomes. So if you get 6 winning fighters in your lineup, no matter how many points they score, if you get 6 winners in your lineup, most likely you min cash. I mean, it's very, 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 there's very few slates that you get a 6 out of 6 and don't even cash. Okay. Most slates, if you get 5 winners in your lineup, if you took a 0 in one spot and then got 5 winners, no matter what 5 winning scores they are, you're probably going to min cash. Okay. 4, maybe not so much. 4, you'll probably need 4 high scoring winners and 2 losers. And 3, you're almost dead. You need the 3 highest scoring fighters. And then even with the losers would still have to put up decent at 40 points or something. Okay. So when you have Jauregui, let's say we're using this as an example, the first fight, you have a 78 from Jauregui. What should you be doing? You should be now focused on low variance fights. You want to optimize and maximize your probability of getting 6 winners or 5 winners in your lineup, no matter how much they score. Don't worry about how much they score. Just want 5 winners. So the low variance fights, the ones that are more likely to go to decision, even if in a loss you may get 35, 40 points, right? 50 points in a loss. And you may squeak out a decision and end up with 70, 80 points. But all you need is like 5 more of those with Jauregui 78, and you probably cash. So your goal is now, let's say you had a lineup. Let's say I'll use this as an example. Let's say you play Pierce, Jauregui. Let's take a look. You play Phil Rowe there. You got 7,800. Maybe play Tuivasa against Pavlovich. You got 8,100 there. You're playing maybe Rojo against Marshall, or let's see, or Valdez against Levy. Right, you got 8,900 left. Maybe something like this. Maybe you have a lineup that looks like this, that fades the main event. You have Pierce, Jauregui, Rowe, Tuivasa, Valdez, Marshall with a very high variance lineup. This is probably a good GPP lineup. Okay, mostly all these are high variance fights. Right, that one guy is going to score a lot and probably is not going to get out of the first or second round. Okay, so let's say Jauregui scores 78 points in this lineup. You're not competing for first place. What game are we playing? We're playing min cash games. So now you look at this and you go, why do I want all these high variance fights? Right? If Pavlovich knocks out Tuivasa in the first round, like Tuivasa scores 6 points. Right? Yeah, Tuivasa can score 100 plus, but you're not aiming for 100 plus anymore. You're playing min cash games. So like if you have the option now, like what's the second fight? Because we're probably not going to know your score. So the next fight is Marshall versus Rojo. Okay. So most likely that fight is going to be locked right? But you're not going to have all these spots. You're going to have this lineup now after knowing Jauregui's score, because Marshall's the next fight. So you're going to end up with that fighter in there. You should be taking out all the high variance fighters and putting in low variance. Now you want to optimize for wins. So now you're more likely to play Jacasey at 9,200 rather than Pierce, right? Get the win. Maybe you don't even pay up for Jacasey, right? You start looking at these low underdogs that are lower variance. Maybe you play Stephen Wonderboy Thompson now, right? The main event underdog. That fight goes, he could win. And the fight goes 4 rounds. Even if he loses, he may put up 50 points. So maybe you plugged him in. Like, what other underdog? We take a look at our sheet. What other underdogs are low variance? I don't consider Michael Johnson to be low variance, but that fight may last a while. But maybe Dolidze, Guida. Like, maybe we put Guida in. So let's put Guida in. Another low variance fight. You get 8,300 left. Maybe you put in Angela Hill. No ceiling. I mean, Ducati Hill is a fight I just X out for GPPs. But at this point, you're not playing for first. Don't worry about, Angela Hill, if she wins, she's going to score 70 points. I'll take 70. If you could tell me that I could take 70 right now at 7,900, when I already have 78 for Jauregui, like, I'm not competing for first. So fine, give me it, right? Give me that. I got 8,700 left, and I play Hermanson against Dolidze. All the low variance fights. I put in as many low variance fights and try to get 5 wins total. That's what you should be doing. Most people think in terms of, I'm behind, I got to now increase the variance. Yeah, if you were competing for first, that would be true, but you're not competing for first anymore. You're not going to win first with 78 points out of Jauregui. Okay? Now, the lineup that we looked at before with Tuivasa and everything, if Jauregui put up 130, now you leave the lineup the way it is. Right now, you care more about ownership, right? You still want the high variance fights, but you don't mind the high own. Maybe you have Pavlovich in the lineup, right? You have Pierce in the lineup. You have Nico Price in the lineup, and you go, no, I'm trying to hit the nuts now. I'm trying to hit I'm competing only against Jauregui lineups now. How do I hit the nuts with it? I don't want 10th place. I want first place. Okay. So if Jauregui put up 130, then you'd leave you want high variance fights, okay? And let's say you played Nunes. Let's say Nunes squeaks out a decision, right? And she ends up with like 75 at 6,900, which is pretty good. She could still be optimal at 75. I'm not sure in a 15-fight card, you got to dodge a lot of stuff and get really high scores out of the top end. But at least then with Nunes in the lineup, you should increase the variance of your lineup. Nunes is now competing for first place, right? And then let's say in the next fight, we have Rojo wins against Marshall, and Rojo puts up 100 points. It's 7,400. Okay? And you don't have Rojo in your lineup. You have Nunes in your lineup. Well, now that Nunes lineup is probably not competing for first place. Now, Nunes at 75, even with Rojo at 7,400 with 100, could still possibly be optimal, but probably not anymore. Anytime if anyone 7,500 or below that puts up more than what other underdog it is, most likely that person isn't going to be optimal. So let's say in Rojo in the next fight puts up 100, and now you're sitting there with just the Nunes lineup. What game are you playing? You're playing for min cash. Now you should be replacing the high variance lineups with high variance fighters with low variance fighters. Then maybe not all of them. You don't have to necessarily do all of them, but at least in the ones that are coming up, right? You have to take a look at the schedule as it goes, right? I took a look at FightOdds.io. You're going to go from Jauregui to the Marshall fight, to the Levy fight, to the Ribas Cortez fight, right? You're going to see what's the next fight coming up. Do I have to switch any of my lineups to that fight to go up in variance or down in variance? That's what you should be doing every 20 minutes. Put an alarm. Put an alarm 5 minutes before any fight locks, right? So typically it's 20 minutes apart. So you're going to put an alarm at 1:15, 1:35, 1:55, stuff like that. So it makes sure that check my lineups. I got 5 minutes to swap out stuff, right? What game am I playing? Look at a lineup. What game am I playing? Okay, let's say you have no fighters and you have nothing, right? Jauregui Nunes happens, and neither fighter is likely to be optimal, and you don't have them. Great, you don't have to worry about it anymore. right? Let's say Marshall Rojo happens and neither fighter is optimal. You don't have either of them. Great. You have more information. Now you have more information. Now you know that Nunes can't be optimal. You know that Rojo can't be optimal. So now you're looking at, it's like, okay, it's more likely Valdez and Tuivasa, Anderson. One of these underdogs need to make a lineup somewhere. So you know that your lineups that have Valdez, Tuivasa, Delidze, whoever on the bottom, I'm not sure if I'm playing anyone underneath Tuivasa. Now, those lineups are more likely to be playing for first place. Okay? So let's say one of them, let's say one of the favorites, let's say the situation where Marshall puts up 100 at 8,800. Could he be optimal? He could be, but not necessarily, right? Let's say, let not even 100. Let's say Marshall puts up 110. Okay? At 8,800, that's a pretty good score. Is it optimal? Could be, could not be. But in Marshall lineups that would be optimal, what do they look like? And this is the second point with late swap. Okay, I'm putting on a masterclass. You could probably refer to this show for anything when it comes to late swap in MMA. Okay? So let's say Marshall in the second fight, I'm using this as an example, puts up 110. Okay? Now, if he puts up 150, yeah, he's probably optimal. Yeah, I don't think anyone's outscoring him. But at 110 at 8,800 is a pretty good score. But, I mean, Pierce could put up 130. Dos Anjos could put up 130, right? Pavlovich could get a quick win bonus, put up 125. I mean, 110 may not make it. Yeah, for 8,800, that's pretty good, right? He's a good shot. He's a very good shot, but not the perfect shot, okay? But let's say you don't have him. You don't have Marshall in your lineup, okay? Let's say you have a lineup that looks more like this. Let's say you have Pierce, Pavlovich, Nico Price. I'm going through kind of a bit of a chalky build. Let's say you have Valdez. You don't have Romo. Let's say you have Delidze, 8,300. Yeah, you're probably not left there. Let's say instead of Nico Price, you have Phil Rowe, 8,900. You don't have Marshall. Let's say you have, instead of Pavlovich, you have Jacasey. Let's say, no, maybe let's say you have Dawkins, 8,800. You don't have Marshall. So let's get off Delidze for Tuivasa down here just to make it all fit. 9,100. Okay, Valdez, Dawkins. Maybe you don't have Dawkins. Maybe do you? Let's see. Dawkins. Do you go up and down? Maybe go in the middle. Maybe you have Holland in the main event, and you have Dos Anjos. Maybe you have something like this. Okay, this is a viable lineup, right? So you pay up twice. You have Dos Anjos and Pierce. Okay. Now lineups that have Dos Anjos and Pierce, look how hard it is to have Marshall in this lineup. Okay, very hard. Right? You'd have to go down from Rowe even further, or down from Valdez and Tuivasa even further to get up 300 more from Holland to Marshall. Okay? Now, this lineup is likely not competing against Marshall lineups. Okay? So when Marshall in the second fight, let's say, puts up 110, you're like, that's 8,800. That could be optimal. That could be in the winning lineup. You want to make your lineups look more like this. So let's say you have nothing from the first two fights. Let's say you have 6 fighters left and 13 fights to go. You don't want lineups that look good with Marshall in it. So let's say you had a lineup that instead of Marshall, you had Natan Levy there. So let's say you had Levy. I'm going to say you have Pierce. Let's say you put up Pierce. You have Tuivasa. You have Delidze, 8,450 left. You have Steven Wonderboy Thompson and Jacasey or something like that. Okay, which has some of the chalk in here, right? A bunch of the chalk. Now this is a 50K lineup with Levy in it, but this lineup looks very much like a Marshall lineup, right? I'm going to replace it, a 49.9 lineup with Marshall. If Marshall puts up 110. That means the only way, the most likely way that your lineup with Levy that looks like this is the winning lineup is if Levy outscores Marshall. You still have to get all the other fighters right as well. So you need to get everything right with the rest of your lineup, and Levy needs to outscore Marshall. If Levy does not outscore Marshall, this type of lineup with the ownership that it's going to be on, you're going to be dead to it, right? People are going to have lineups that look like your Levy lineup, but have Marshall in it, or look like your Hermanson lineup, look like your Pavlovich lineup, but have Marshall in it. Okay, so if you had this lineup and you have 13 fights to choose from, when Marshall scores 110 points, you want to make your lineup not look like a Marshall lineup, because you're not going to it's possible that Marshall isn't optimal. And if he's not optimal, then it's probably because it's a different construction, not because, two fighters above him put up 20 more points than him, and an underdog or two put up 105. And it's like he's in a price range where you can't fit everything in. Okay? Now, if Marshall puts up 70 in a win or something, now you want to keep your lineup. Now it's like, oh, this is what Marshall lineups look like. Marshall won with 75 points. I think Levy is a great shot of beating him, right? I want to compete against those lineups. I want to. Your opponents aren't going to swap as much. So now I'm not going to swap because I already have a lineup that looks like a Marshall lineup that I could beat. If it's a lineup that you don't think you could beat, you can't make it look like that. So what lineups are you competing against? And that's what I did 2 weeks ago with Ricky Tercios. I had Natividad in that lineup that won. And Natividad actually put up 74 points in a loss on that fight. That was a wild fight. Tercios put up 116, I think, at 8,600. And what I immediately what I did was I can't build lineups that look like Tercios. I didn't have any Tercios. What do Tercios lineups look like back then? They probably need to spend down on an underdog that isn't Jennifer Maia. So that's probably Chase Sherman or Kudalaba. Okay? Which means I got to get off of those guys. And it's probably more beneficial that since Tercios lineups had Sherman or Kudalaba in it, that I should be playing a guy that's against those guys, right? I want to bust Tercios lineups. I want Sherman to lose, and I want Kudalaba to lose, which means I probably should play Cortez Acosta, and I probably should play Kennedy Ejekwu, or one of the two, because they're directly negatively correlated to what Tercios lineups look like. Tercios Della Maddalena type of lineups look like. So that's what you should be thinking about when you late swap throughout the course of this slate. If a guy is more likely to be optimal, what do those lineups look like? And if you don't have them, you don't want your lineups to look like that. Okay? Now, if you're sure that they're going to be optimal, let's say Marshall put up 140 points. Like now, if you don't have him, you ain't competing for first place. End of story. Now, all your lineups, you're min cashing. Now, I would be putting in all low variance fighters and try to get 5+ wins out of your lineup. Cash all your lineups and move on to next week. Right? If Marshall loses and Rojo still only puts up 70 points, the fight's a bust. And if you don't have them, great. Now you're in position to win. Right? If Marshall puts up 95, like 8,800, 9,500 is pretty good. What's the shot at him being optimal? There is a shot, 10, 20% or something like that. But probably you don't mind your lineups looking like Marshall lineups. As long as you get like Pavlovich or Levy or Holtzman or Hermanson to beats that score, your lineup will beat Marshall lineups that look like that. Okay? So that's what you should be thinking of. How often is this fighter optimal or in the winning lineup, depending on the size of the field that you're playing? Obviously, in large field, you're pretty much playing for the optimal. Small field, you're just playing for like the highest scoring lineup. It's going to be closer. It's going to be close to the optimal, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the nuts. So that's what you should be asking. What game am I playing? Put it on a Post-it note. Put it on a Post-it note. What game am I playing? Don't go like, oh, I missed. I in the first fight. Let's say we have the Marshall Rojo fight. Let's say Marshall loses and you have 8,800 Marshall in your lineup. and he has 12 points. You go, oh, I got to switch out. I got to play Brian Barberena now. I got to play Darren Elkins now. No, you don't. You just have to get 5 winners in your lineup. Just get 5 winners in your lineup. That's it. And if it means going to Ducati Hill, if it means going to Ribas Cortez, if it means going to Holtzman Guida, the closer fights that are more likely to go to decision, but maybe not give you 100 points and a win, that's more likely. More likely to get a win than try to get a plus 500 underdog or something. What's Barberena? Plus 415? Elkins is plus 350. Like you're not aiming for 100 points. You're just aiming for wins. Just aim for 70 points out of the rest of your spots. You get 70 out of 5 spots, you're probably going to cash. Okay? What game am I playing? Say that to yourself. Clay Davis asks, hello, Mr. Blender. Can you please show us your prize picks process? The prize picks process. This is what you do for prize picks. You sign up for RotoGrinders. Okay? That's the first thing. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. Then you look at the projections. Okay? Then you compare the statistical projections to what the number is on prize picks. If it's significantly over or significantly under, then you take it. That's it. There's no complicated process. There's none, right? You go to the blitz projections for NFL. If so-and-so running back, 87 yards, mean projection. And you can look on prize picks and it's 64. We'll take the over. There you go. The blitz projections say 68 and the number 64. That's not a big enough of a discrepancy. So you're looking for large discrepancies. That's it. There's no other process. You compare one number to another number. And if it's enough of a percentage off, right, significantly enough off on rushing yards, passing yards, NBA points, rebounds, whatever, that's all you do. So basically you just go into the statistical projections page, and you know what you do? You put them side by side, right? And you look at one column, and then you look at the prize picks. I know I'm saying it very patronizingly, but that's what it is. There's nothing more to it. We have projections. And over the long period of time, our projections are probably going to be better than the numbers that they put up. Over a long period of time. How long of a period of time, you ask? Oh, I did this for your projections for 3 weeks, and I'm only breaking even or something. Or doing really well, or doing really badly. Said, do I have to change anything? It's like, no. You over the long period of time, it's like, well, is 3 weeks enough? It's like, dude, 3 years may not even be enough. Okay? Understand long-term means long-term. Okay? I've always said, when it comes to DFS, most people's ROIs, from a stability standpoint, within one standard deviation, are not accurate, and none could be accurate. That you could play every slate in the history of DFS and still not have a sample size large enough for GPPs to be within one standard deviation of your true ROI, of your true skill. DFS has been around for like 12 years. If you played every slate on every site ever made in every sport, 1-game slates, 5-game slates, turbo slates, every slate, tiers slates, classic, everything. Every showdown, everything for every game, everywhere. Right? And you played, I don't know, 50,000 slates like that. Your true ROI in GPP would still not be within one standard deviation. So that, understand how much long-term really means. DFS Voodoo is here. Good morning. Cloud Kicker can't stick around. I don't know, why can't you stick around? But he hit the like button, so that's fine. But that's MMA. Like MMA, focusing on late swap, especially if you're playing the smaller field stuff, right? In the larger field, you're trying to hit the optimal regardless, right? Right. So it's not. Yeah, late swap. There's a benefit, obviously, but still, like once you don't have a fighter that's most likely going to be optimal, you're dead for first. I mean, you're probably not going to win first place. The optimal is most likely going to be the first place score in the large field. In the small field, it ain't. Right? I won 30K without Tercios, and Tercios was like the second highest scoring fighter on the slate for 8,600. But he was 16% owned, and most people that had Tercios had Kudalaba and Sherman, and they both lost. And I have Maya at like 8% in the 555, and she put up like 78 points. I had a losing fighter at 74 that was only 12% owned, and bing, bong, bing. No other underdog won. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I guess I don't need Tercios to win the 555. So that's why it's a little bit more important in small field. Also, it's easier to see what you need and you don't need, especially towards late in the card, right? Because there's not many lineups to look through. Right? You look and you go, okay, I got five winning scores here. I'm sitting there, I see the PMR, the fights remaining left, and there's only a couple of lineups that I thought, okay, what could they have? Oh, they paid up there, so they must have this underdog. Oh, they paid down here, they must have this favorite. In the large field, you probably have to look at like 60 different lineups, and they may have 2v2s, and you have to compute all of that. And unless you have some type of like automated process to simulate that out and guess and stuff, it's going to be pretty tough. That's why I keep it at 8. I do it on my phone, right? Once the card starts, I don't even come back to my computer. I did it on my phone. I just go, what game am I playing? Look at a lineup. What game am I playing? Okay, let me swap in and out. And then maybe on my phone, I bring up this spreadsheet. I mean, by the time the card comes around, I know which fights the high variance ones and the low variance ones, right? But I still put them here anyway. So I hope you learned something. Like this is the key. You even if you're not going to win first, just getting 20% more of your lineups to min cash could have a significant effect on your ROI, right? Sometimes it's survive in advance. Sometimes it's just rescuing money rather than making money. Like it's not a matter of like, oh, how much profit am I going to have? It's like, how do I have the least amount of loss? Right? Let's say I don't have Pavlovich in any of my lineups, and he goes out in quick win bonuses, tied to Avasa, and I have nothing. It's like, okay, well, I ain't gonna win. So how do I maximize my percent of only losing 20% on the slate rather than losing 60% on the slate? I'm probably not going to profit no matter what, but I'd rather lose 20% than try to make up ground that doesn't exist, right? Some early knockout happens and you don't have them. And next thing you're doing is you're pivoting to Elkins and Barberena, and you're playing Ducati at no ownership, hoping for a miracle. And even if you got all of your miracles, you probably still don't make first place because you don't have a guy that you need for the optimal lineup. But if you get the miracle, you come in maybe you come in 54th place, right? For like 8x, maybe 6x, something like that. And that's a miracle. That's a low percentage point. Or you could say, screw the top 1%, right? And just go, I'm just going to optimize, just maximize my chance of getting 5 wins, get my 1.5x, and move on. The likelihood of getting that may be 40% rather than 5% of getting 8x. And if you do that on your lineups on a consistent basis, instead of having, it could add up. I mean, even if you're playing lower volume, if you're playing $50, $100 a slate, that may be the equivalent of $20, $15, $20 per slate that you play of rescuing lineups to the min cash. Okay, so let's say it's $20 a slate and you play 40 over the course of a year, and you're only playing $50 to $100 a slate. Like 40 slates, like $800. I mean, that's like 8 slates worth of your volume. Why not rescue it? Don't go. Oh, I have a losing fighter. Let me take Brian Barberena. That's what your natural instinct. I got to make up ground. But make up ground for what? You're not playing the first place game anymore. That isn't the game anymore. You're playing a double up at this point, right? You're playing a 50-50. That's the game you're playing. You're no longer in a GPP. You only care about the min cash line. That's it. Anything past there is gravy, if anything. And then if you have an optimal fighter, now you're playing for first. Now it's like, how do I get even different from the lineups that are around me? There it should be more likely you play Barberena. I'm not saying you do, but he's going, how do I get different from these lineups? And also it's a good point where you can leave money on the table. You could start off with 50K lineups and by the end of it have a lineup that has 49-3 in it, 48-8 in it, right? You don't have to build the lineups that leave money on the table from the start. You could end there as the slate goes on. I'll be talking about this all the time because there's not much content since it just started with DK late swap for MMA. There's not much people talking about the game theory of doing it in MMA, especially when it's non-correlative, right? The fights in and of itself aren't correlated to each other, and it's very binary. It's very similar to the golf. Imagine golf had late swap after every hole of every golf, or every tee time of every golf. You'd be doing the same exact thing. I got this guy in my lineup. He's already shot 4 over in the first 3 holes. And you got guys coming up that are teeing off. It's like, dude, that guy's, consider that a lost cause at this point. Oh, now I have to switch on to lower owned fighters. No, just try to get 5 guys through the cut. Right? That guy's a lost cause. Oh, he's done. You're not competing for first place. That guy's not going to make the cut probably. So now you should be switching to golfers that are more likely to make the cut, not ones that are going to put up, tons of birdies. Just make 5 out of 6. You probably cash. Okay. Hit the thumbs up button on your way out the door. Helps us out. Helps us out a lot. Remember that at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. is the card time tomorrow. Not an early. I prefer the early ones. I want the 4 o'clock ones. I like the 1 o'clock ones even better. But we got that, and then we got UFC 282 after that, then another card after that, and then we get like a month off of MMA. But that's what I do here on Fridays. It's Fighting Fridays. We didn't fight with each other that much, but I'm just fighting to teach you the game theory of MMA late swap. And as long as you're not using it in my contests, I wish the best of luck to you. We got basketball later today, NBA Grinders Live. We got tons of NFL content coming out on the channel today. I got a premium game theory show for NFL Week 13 with Tuttle. That's behind the paywall. So sign up for NBA. Sign up for Combo Premium. You get the access to my game theory channel in the RotoGrinders Discord, where that's the place to talk to me. You can post anything you want in there. I will try to answer anything. And yeah, James Aguirre has a last question. Do you put a number on how much correlation is worth to a lineup? Do you eyeball it? I eyeball it. You would have to build a simulation model in order to do it more precisely. Okay. So I'll be back on Monday with James. Like we meet on Mondays as usual, going over reviewing the NFL slate. The pricing on DraftKings is actually pretty decent. We don't have to build 2 tight end lineups at all this week. Fans is a little bit tougher, but there'll be tons of NFL content going over that on the channel. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, rate and review it if you can there, and I'll be back answering your DFS strategy questions Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.